Leadership 101, the four most powerful words in leadership. I need your help.
You are now listening to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast with your host, George Valenzuela.
This is education coach George Valenzuela. Welcome to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast, where I provide all educators, whether instructional leaders or teachers, tips on how to be their best both personally and professionally. Now let's get into it. We're here today with the one and only Jimmy Casas. Jimmy is a well-known education consultant and author. He's the CEO of J. Casas and Associates, and I'm happy to have him on the show. How are you?
I'm doing great, George.
Jimmy, you're already well known, but give us your backstory. How did you get into education, and what steps did you take to get where you are now as a consultant?
I'm the son of migrant workers who were born and raised in Texas and landed in Iowa. And I tell people often I didn't have a good school experience, to be honest with you, for many reasons. So we won't get into all those stories today. But I know this, that it really influenced, I think, the educator eventually that I would become. I think many people who go into the profession go in because maybe they were inspired by a teacher or a coach and inspired them to maybe go into the profession. Maybe others like me who didn't have a good school experience went into the profession because they thought no child should ever be treated that way. And I think other people just have a natural gift, right? They have a gift to when they're around people that people just love to be around them because of the way they pour into people or the aura that they have about them and so forth. I actually fell into teaching by accident. I fell into teaching because I had volunteered at elementary school and just fell in love with it. I started my career in Milwaukee Public Schools, the inner city. I'm born and raised in Iowa. So to me, to go to the inner city to work with kids who look like me was something new. And it was something that was just awesome and just something that I just fell in love with. And I only taught 4 years, George. And that is because there were people who I think saw something in me and maybe saw some potential and encouraged me to go into school leadership. And believe it or not, at the age of 26, someone took a chance on me and literally handed me this set of keys to a school.
Wow.
And that became the beginning of a 22-year principalship career that ended about 7 years ago when I left the profession, and because I couldn't balance it all. I was speaking and it was become a lot. I loved doing that work, but I loved being a principal even more. Maybe you've had this experience, but I would come back from being on the road and I'd be more jacked up to go do my job, right? Let's get more pumped. But it did get to the point where it was a lot. And I really believe that I could make a living at it. And more importantly, hopefully help a lot more people. And God has blessed me in many ways. And I've been blessed, and I'm very grateful for it. And to this day, continue to do a lot of coaching work and really trying to support school leaders and district leaders in a job that sometimes can seem impossible. But at the end of the day, I believe it's ministry work, and it's probably the most important work. And I think we need to provide help to people. But that's why I said when we started that it is really about asking people for help, because I do believe those are the four most powerful words in leadership today.
Isn't that amazing? You're doing your job. You think you're going to be a teacher, and that's all you're going to do. It's all about relationships. People see you, hear you, and they bring you into leadership. That's fantastic. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening on Spotify or iTunes, please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like button and share this episode with your family, friends, and colleagues who are interested in self-improvement through lifelong learning. And now for a word from one of our sponsors.
We had the pleasure of listening to George this morning on project-based learning, and he shared his story that his aunt encouraged him to go into education. And she was absolutely right. He is so talented at sharing information in a way that's easy to digest and is inspiring to go back and actually implement and make change.
So my takeaway is that Mr. Valenzuela was very inspiring. He was very motivational and helped me to think about a new way of getting my teachers excited.
When I set out to do a workshop, my key deliverable is energy. And this momentum is used to make connections, inspire, educate, and ultimately transform the audience, so that they're compelled to take that same energy back to their schools and communities. And although we have fun, we tackle the hard topics of today, like educational policy, pedagogy for improving curriculum and instruction, and empowering today's students by connecting our work to the needs of the workforce. So please consider lifelong learning defined for your next keynote, workshop, or conference, and overall instructional and educational coaching needs. My name is George, and I hope to connect with you soon.
We would love to have him come and do some work with us and help us be a little more successful and help our students to be more successful.
Are technology issues slowing you down at your school? If that's the case, look no further than 5-Star Technology's Virtual Help Desk. Their team of experts are available to support you remotely, resolving up to 40% of common issues, like password resets, device connectivity, and lots more. With just a few clicks, you'll have access to their live chat from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. Just enter your email to get started. Then you'll live chat with one of 5-Star's EdTech experts to diagnose your problem. And if their virtual help desk agent can't solve the issue completely, they will dispatch the ticket to your school's on-site tech team. Let 5-Star Technology Solutions be your support partner. Experience their virtual help desk, which is affordable, efficient, and always there for you. Please contact them at 5startech.com/contact us. Once again, 5startech.com/contact us. And for your convenience, you'll find this link in the episode show notes. Jimmy, you're doing a lot of work with school culture. What is the primary message of your coaching on culture?
The primary message would be is that everybody in the organization is responsible for the culture and climate of the organization. So if we look at culture and we begin to understand culture and try to define it, the way I define it is that culture is just behavior. And so then all we have to do to really understand the cultures of our organizations is simply, as I always say, is if we look at the words on the walls in our schools. If I walk into a school today and look at the words on the wall, the question is always the same. Do the behaviors of the adults in the organization match or mirror the words on the wall? And if they don't, then we're probably going to have a problem. And the reason that is because we can quickly lose credibility as school leaders when we say one thing, but our behavior shows something else. Or when the teacher, if we have kindness matters up on the wall, which we do in all schools almost today, then why am I walking into buildings and seeing a lot of not so much kindness, right? Whether it's the way the adults treat each other, the way the adults talk to kids, whether it's negative or whether it's gossip or whatever it is. But I thought we talked about kindness so that it looks great up on the wall, but then our behaviors doesn't mirror that. And so to me, that's the real culture. And so we lose credibility when we say, well, we got a great culture here. No, you don't, because if you did, your words, your behaviors would match those words on the wall. So I think we have to be a little careful about that. And so, yeah, that's who we want to be, and that's who we're striving to be. But then everybody's got to strive for that. And more importantly, how do we then hold people accountable in a kind, caring, compassionate way to be that individual? Because that's who we want to be, I believe.
I hear a lot of speakers use culture and climate synonymously. Unpack the difference for a moment.
Yeah, I try to keep things simple. So again, I don't have a monopoly on this, so I'm not saying it right. But again, I just see culture as behavior, right? You walk in an organization, look at the way people are behaving. That to me is the culture. Some people will say it's the traditions and the rituals and the customs, but it's how we behave in the organization. So that's why I call it, just simplify it, it's about behavior. Where climate's more of a feeling, right? I can come in and I can sense the climate, like there's a tension in the air, or I can give somebody and allow somebody to wear jeans today, right? And all of a sudden they feel good about things. That's a feeling, but it's quickly going to fade. That's why I always say culture isn't about donuts and jeans days, right? That's more climate to me. It's a feeling, but that feeling goes very quickly, right? But it's more about the behaviors of the people in the organization. So just think climate, the way people feel, culture, the way people behave.
Hey, Jimmy, you host your own summer institutes for educators and have a bunch of them this summer in Chicago, Kansas City, and Wisconsin. Tell us about them.
For Culturize, right, let's just take it from that, the Culturize Institute. It's really Culturize is a framework. And it's a framework for all of us to ask ourselves, how do I want to live each day? And so we're not asking people to adopt the 4 core principles of Culturize. But what we are trying to help encourage people is to help them understand, where are you drawing it from? What is your framework to teach from or to lead from? And so the Culturize Institute really is to bring people together because for whatever reason, and again, I don't understand it, George, I promise you I don't, But for whatever reason, Culturize continues even 7 years later. It resonates with people, and people continue to read it and comment about it and want me to talk about it and even adopted it. There are many schools across the country, which is crazy, who have adopted the 4 core values of Culturize. They implement as their behavior framework in their schools. But the Culturize Institute really is just to continue to bring people together, to give people an opportunity. But it was also to look at culturizing not only our buildings, but how do we culturize our classrooms? How do we culturize our districts? And so we began to understand that how do we bring people together and help them really break it down, make it really practical. But our hope is that people develop frameworks of how they're going to teach and how they're going to lead, and more importantly, how they're going to behave in their everyday lives. And so it's really to continue that work and to support people in that mission.
That's what I love about your work. Anyone that's been in a graduate program should know that before anything becomes a mindset, something that people naturally do, it's got to be a framework first. And if you're trying to accomplish anything, you have to look at what's been done. And there's either a framework, a system, or a model. When you go into schools that haven't adopted something, it's just winging it.
Yeah, you don't want to leave it to chance, that's for sure. But people have to understand the benefits of frameworks too. Right? And I think sometimes we don't think about that. Why would I create a framework? Number one, it brings clarity to people, right? If you think about culture again, you think about behavior, it brings clarity in terms of expectations, how we're all going to behave in the organization. But frameworks also slow us down. And I think that's part of the issue, especially in school leadership. We're just moving so quickly. And we need a place to help us slow down, because I think we get really sloppy in the work that we do because we're moving so quickly. And again, we're not judging it, we just see it. And what we observe is that principals feel responsible for everything. So they're moving very quickly. They feel they have to make every decision. They have to give an answer right now. They have to fix everything, right? There's a lot of fixers out there, and that's dangerous. But frameworks also, they allow us to become predictable. And I think effective leaders are predictable, because when you have a framework and you draw from somewhere, you're consistent in doing so. So now people are very clear. Oh, I know how he's going to respond because I know what he expects of me. And I like that. It creates a comfort for me because I don't have to try to figure it out. How's he going to respond today? Is he in a good mood? Is he in a bad mood? It doesn't matter. He draws it from the same place. You're going to get a consistent response. And so it makes us very predictable. But it also, frameworks allow us to influence. It allows us to influence people in the organization. And so I think effective leaders create frameworks, and it allows us to draw these, how we're going to make decisions, from where are we going to draw it from. And so a framework is very important in doing so. And Culturize is simply a framework, but it's a framework for adult behavior, not for student behavior. We see a lot of frameworks out there, George, for student behaviors, but again, I'm not trying to be critical of them, but it's interesting to me that we focus a lot of our work on student behavior. I always say, you know what, you want to change kid behavior, change the adult behavior first, because we're the ones that are creating the issues, in my opinion, not the kids.
Folks out there listening, superintendents, principals, directors, coordinators, what I love about Jimmy's work is that you often see him in schools working with the teaching teams, working with administrators, and impacting the culture. That is such an important thing. Be wary of folks that aren't in schools.
Yeah, and it's hard. And I try to be very transparent, because obviously, George, I haven't been a principal now going on 7 years.
I see you in schools. I see you in schools.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like my perspective and my experience is even broader now. Because again, when you're in your own school, first of all, I did it for 22 years. It's not like you just walk away. Really? That happens in schools? I had no idea. I still carry the wounds and the battle scars, right? But also the learnings and the takeaways from those reflections. But the opportunity today, don't get me wrong, George, I love keynoting, I love speaking, and I always will. But my passion is coaching, because it's still teaching. And I have the opportunity now. I don't just have this lens, right? I have this lens now. And I have the lens from whether it's urban or suburban or inner city or rural or Indian reservations or out in the bush of Alaska. I have all these experiences now. And I just take those experiences and I tell people the content that I write about and talk about is really their experiences. But I'm trying to bring hope to people. And to me, that's the culture of that organization. And then I try to understand what's creating that. And then that's what I try to do, is create and take that work and try to create some frameworks to give people some hope that, hey, we can do this work. We just have to do it differently and see it differently, first of all.
For folks out there that are interested in entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship, you see the keynotes and you see all these great things. That's a result of being a good writer, being a good author, and people just liking your work. The real work is in schools. I myself, from 2014 to 2020, spent years in schools all around America, just coaching inner city, urban, rural, high performing, low performing, and just learning education in many different contexts. And then the keynoting and all that came afterwards. But the real work is in schools. Fantastic. And now for a word from one of our sponsors. If you're a STEM and PBL teacher like me, you're always on the lookout for new project ideas and resources. You know George does PBL, and I'm telling you, look no further than SmartLab. SmartLab really has a fresh take on STEM and PBL. I'm proud to be a partner, and they sponsor the podcast. But just don't take my word for it. Check out what other educators are saying about SmartLab.
When students enter into SmartLab, they are allowed to think outside of traditional norms.
It gives them a lot of agency. They feel empowered and important. I think that's one of the biggest benefits of the SmartLab environment and the way the project process is set up.
SmartLab becomes this place where they can do those things and have the time and space to communicate better and even deal with social emotional stuff. They're having a bad day. A SmartLab's a place where we can change the pace of what they're learning to match their mental needs for the day. And that comes back tenfold later on when they want to be there and they want to learn and they want to do stuff and they feel safe and they feel like they can get the things they need.
That's one of the big benefits of being in more of a collaborative environment is it makes you have to work. It makes you have to be accountable.
Please look in this episode's show notes for a link to connect with SmartLab. Now let's get into your consulting business. What do you love most about being an edupreneur?
I fell into it by accident, to be honest with you. I didn't sign up for this. I think what I loved about it most important, this is going to sound crazy. When you leave the principal, George, and you feel like you question it for a second, right? You miss it, first of all, because you'd walk into schools every day. There's 1,700 kids in that school. There's 200 adults, and you had this community family. Go ahead.
Hey, Jimmy, I cried in my car on my last day at central office. See, people don't see that part. I literally sat in my car, my office unpacked, and I cried. But life does move on.
Yeah, I went into my office on a Sunday night, George, and I just sat there probably for about an hour. And it's funny, right? You just try to have all these memories and reflections because especially my last school, I was only in 4 schools, but my last school, I was there for 14 years as the principal. That's a lot of time in a school, and you got a lot of memories and you've built a lot of relationships. But yeah, same thing. On a Sunday night, I remember I think like the Cheers episode, right? When they turn off the lights and just walk out. That's kind of what it was like. We just turned off the lights and walked out. And I knew I was never going back. And it's just hard when you walk away from that. But I was also excited about the opportunities that were going to come. And the question you asked me is, what I wanted to do was to see if I could actually take the practices that I had learned really more in my last 10 years, George, because in my first 12 years, I'll be honest, I was just trying to figure it out, still making a ton of mistakes. And it's not that I didn't make mistakes in my last 10 years, but they certainly weren't. They were different kinds of mistakes. But at the end of the day, I finally gained some confidence that I could lead. I could lead an organization, I could lead people. And I wanted to see, George, if I could replicate that in a business world. I wanted to see one of the things I think I did do well. There wasn't a lot of things I think I did well as a school leader, but one thing I know I did well is I believed I built a really strong, cohesive admin team that became like this, right?
Cohesive being the key word.
Yeah, and I missed, and I worried about that. I was already missing it literally days after I left. But I thought, no, I'm going to go do that again because I know I can do that. And so part of being an entrepreneur was building that team again and building a company and then taking those learnings from being a school leader and seeing if I could replicate that in the business world. Because I remember, George, I said I'd come back from being on the road and I'd be all jacked up, but I'd also learn a lot about being a principal. And I think that's why I became such a better principal is because of going on the road and coming back. It made me better because I would ask myself, wait a second, I'm out in the buildings right now and I'm observing this and I'm reflecting on my own school. And then I'm having these conversations and asking all these questions of these principals. Then I'm saying, but wait a second, Jimmy, are you doing that? You're having these conversations. So it helps you reflect and hopefully makes you a better version of you. But what I learned from that is I wanted to take that and I wanted to give other people that same opportunity, that same feeling. So right away, I was bringing people on my team that I respected and that were practitioners. And they would all say the same thing. Jimmy, what I love about this work is coming together, because I too am isolated. Now I feel like I'm a part of this strong team. But when I go back to my building, I feel like I'm a better principal. And then that made me feel better. I'm like, oh, now I'm still impacting organizations and schools and buildings and people, but just in a different way.
I love that you say that it took you a while to become an expert at what you were doing or being a good leader. I remember when I first got my central office job and I was responsible for my content area in 50 schools. I remember the mentor I was assigned said to me, young man, it's going to take you 9 years to learn this job. Inwardly, I'm thinking, yeah, he's crazy. In 3 years, I'm on to the next thing. And it literally took me 9 years. It took me 9 years, but also as a consultant in those last few years, my confidence did not come until I left my district, did PD in another district, went back to my district, but then went back for a sustained support visit and seeing the results in real time and seeing people that you impacted, because when you met them, they didn't have the confidence. And now you're seeing them in front of their school board with their students doing a phenomenal job. That builds you up and you start realizing, hey, I can do this. And then you want to do more and more so that you can build others up. Jimmy, have you faced any disappointments in business and how did you overcome them? There's no yellow brick road.
That's a good question, George. I really hadn't thought about that, the disappointment. I'm certainly disappointed myself sometimes just because I always want to produce at high levels. Maybe one thing initially, maybe it was because I felt like I wanted to build this company. And then probably about 4 years into it, I realized that maybe I don't want to be this big company. I want to be this maybe smaller company. And so maybe just disappointing myself because maybe I was not thinking about it the right way. And then in doing so, had to slow things down and have some conversations with some people that perhaps weren't aligned in the work that I thought we needed to go in that direction. And that's always the hard part, because I feel, especially when you talk about reculturize or whatever the work is, I feel like it's tied to my name. And so I have to be really careful about who I let into that inner circle and who's going to do work for me, because just like anything else, this job will mess with you. And just like we see in schools, you said at the beginning that this business also, there's a lot of competition. I'm probably more disappointed sometimes in the way people treat other people. And at the end of the day, I feel like, why can't we just support one another? Because we do the same thing. Yeah, I don't know if it's disappointing the business. Maybe it's more disappointing in the business in general, because I do think there's a lot of people out there I think talk a great game. I'm not sure they live that game though. But again, that's not for me to judge. That's for them to figure out. But for me, the hard part is trying to figure out who's real and who's not real. And I think I have a pretty good read on people, but every now and then I still get caught, right? Because you want to believe the best in people, but not everybody's in it for the right reasons.
Early on, I was thinking, teach a lot of people, show them what to do, lead teams. You ride a wave. I rode a wave from April 2020 all the way into March of 2024. And then you got to sit back, assess, reassess, look at things, and maybe change your goals a little bit and just realize that what you thought it was going to be, it's not like that. It really comes down to who can you really count on? That's an important thing. Always surround yourself with the right people. That's fantastic, Jimmy. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening on Spotify or iTunes, please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like button and share this episode with your family, friends, and colleagues who are interested in self-improvement through lifelong learning. What's your top advice for other edupreneurs?
I would say number one is whatever the work is, ease into it. Number one, build a strong foundation, which means you got to develop a lot of content, right? You have to be able to develop content. And so one of the things I do see a lot today is that, again, when you first start off, you're like everything, right? You're your own secretary, you're making your own travel plan, because obviously you're just starting out. But one of the things I do to say to people is you have to then begin to understand how important building content is, because especially once you leave the field, if you're going to stay relevant and those types of things, what are you doing intentionally to do that? So that's one thing definitely I would say to people is, how do you continue to build the capacity within your organization and allow some of those tasks to be given to someone else? So it's worth that to have someone help you with that work. The other thing is this, I think some people move too quickly. And what I mean by that, George, isn't, probably not, and if I'm being honest, probably not a month goes by. Sometimes it even happens more frequently than that, like on a weekly basis, but at least for sure within a month, someone reaches out to me and says, hey, can I talk to you? But I want to do what you do. And the first thing I tell them is don't quit your day job, right? I think there's this belief that I can just go do this, and it's not that easy. And it's fun when you just go do it for fun because you're still a principal or a leader and you want to go out and have a talk. And I get it. You go out, it jacks you up and you're like, God, this was awesome. Or somebody comes up and says, that was great. That was awesome. And you get all pumped up and all of a sudden you get a little juices flowing or maybe you make a little money on the side or whatever. And you get all excited. And now you're thinking, I want to go quit my job and I can go do this. And I tell people, do not do that. Do not do that. Because once you quit your job, it changes everything. It no longer becomes just about, hey, it's something I just do on the side because I enjoy doing it. Now it becomes a grind because I got to make a living at it. And and that'll mess with you a little bit. And so I do tell people, hey, stay in the game. If you keep doing the work, if you're good enough to do it, it'll keep coming at you. But one thing I always ask is an example I give, which is a hard truth to do, but I have to tell people, I say, look, if you're asking me, I'll tell you something, but you got to be ready what I'm going to say to you. And if it hurts your feelings, then you don't want me to say it.
Right.
And I said, so I want you to reflect. So if you give me permission, I'll tell you, but if you don't want to hear it, I won't say a word. And they're like, no, tell me what I need to hear. And I said, okay, here's how I want you to see it. Tell me about the last time you spoke somewhere. And then they tell me, I said, how many people are in the audience? And they might say something like, 75 or 125. I said, okay, when you walked away, how many more jobs have you gotten from that talk? I said, because if you haven't gotten any more work, I don't care how great you think you were, or how great they told you were. If you haven't gotten any more work from that job, then something's not right.
You're not ready yet.
And you have to see that, right? Because you can go out and talk, but when you have to make a living at it, I use the 55 rule for me. It's 55% of that audience should have reached out to you to ask more questions about potentially hiring you. And another half of that, you should have closed the deal. So do the math. If you do 100 in the audience, you on average should get 2.5 gigs out of that. That's just how I see it. If you don't, something's not right with your message or the way you deliver it or something in the content or something. But it's going to be really hard to make a living if you're not getting any more work after you talk. So don't quit your day job, dude. So I try to be honest with people on that. Because it'll mess with you and it's hard. And keep doing it for fun. Keep enjoying it. I tell people, George, I spoke for 18 years for free before anybody ever paid me. And now people want to go speak one time and leave their jobs and go get paid large amounts of money. Like, I don't think it works that way. And I'm not saying it doesn't for some people, but they are the exception, right? They are the true exception. Most people are going to grind for a while, just like in any other job. You grind for a while.
You said something important a few minutes ago. You said you feel good about yourself. A lot of people don't realize when you're up there speaking, you start getting dopamine, endorphins. If you don't have any receipts, you haven't really accomplished the thing that you're speaking about. Then what happens is, and I've seen this in a few cases, someone has success early on because they are very charismatic. They have a great way of speaking, but then they quit their job, but they haven't accomplished anything yet.
Yeah.
I prefer to move slow and to accomplish things first. And you're speaking from experience. And when you're walking off, you realize that this was a great moment, but now it's on to the next thing. The thing that has helped me is that I have a great family. I have a great support system. When I come home, the last thing they want to hear about what the speech was about, your children and your wife and your friends, they have their own lives and we have to be there for them and we have to support them and not believe our own hype.
That's what I love about the coaching aspect, because the speaking is one thing, but the coaching to me is the skill. If you don't have that experience, you're not going to be able to really teach it, really. You can tell people. That's a whole different, it's not the same. Telling is not the same. It's how do you actually, like a teacher, break it down and really help them see it and teach them how to do it so they can do it for themselves. And that's the skill. And that's what I love about coaching. And that's why I say that's really my passion, because I do feel like I have something to offer. But at the same time, it's, again, just like you said, it can mess with you a little bit because you get that feeling, and I get it. And I tell people, it's okay. It's good. It does feel good. And you should feel good about that. But there's a difference between doing it for fun and doing it for a living. And so I just say, from an entrepreneur side, just be careful about that a little bit. Ease into it.
What a perfect way to end the show. Let's put it in the universe. How can people find you, Jimmy, so they can book you to speak at their conference, school, or event?
Yeah, George, the easiest way, just go to the website, jimmycasas.com. It's the easiest way. Everything's there. If you need anything or to reach out, contact information and so forth, and information about the services that we provide as an organization. So absolutely, just go to jimmycasas.com.
That's it for this episode. Until next time, this is the Lifelong Learning to Find podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast with George Valenzuela.